You want to win a fantasy championship? I know you do. Luckily, you clicked on the right video. This is how you dominate your fantasy football league in 2024. Tips and strategy to dominate draft day and win your championship in 2024. Spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more OwnersBox fantasy football tips all NFL season long, and comment any fantasy questions you have for me. Let's begin with 5 tips to win your league. Beginning with practice. I know it's cliche, but practice makes perfect. And that's especially true in fantasy football. So mock draft. But there's multiple ways to mock draft. You want to use a simulator. Why? You want to understand from pick 3 or pick 7 or pick 10. If I have pick 10, I can use the Fantasy Pros simulator, and from pick 10, I can understand who's going to be there on average. Understanding average draft position, which is so much of drafting. Understanding where players go. Understanding the value. The players I want to target in certain sections of the draft. That is what is useful about mock drafts. So for the simulator's sake, Sleeper, Fantasy Pros, that's a great way to understand if you already know your pick and I'm going into a draft and I understand I have pick 2. I can do 100 drafts in like one day if I really wanted to from that position and understand who's going to go here on average. If this player ends up going, well, then I can pivot to this, right? So that is where that's successful, and that's where that is fun and interesting, okay? Then you get to best ball. That is the best way, in my opinion, to mock draft, because best ball, Underdog, DraftKings, wherever you're playing best ball, right? It's competitive. It's sharp. The ADP is better. The competition is better. You're playing fantasy against the best of the best, the real freaks of the fantasy freaks, okay? These guys are absolute down and dirty in the depth charts, okay? So that is why it's useful, because you're playing the top-notch competition. So your home league's going to be easy. If you go into an Underdog Best Ball Mania draft and you come out on top with a good team, and then you go to your home league, it's going to feel like, why is this player in like round 10 when he goes in round 7 in Underdog Fantasy? Or on DraftKings, this guy went round 6. Why is he still here in round 8? So when it comes to best ball, the reason it's so good to get you prepared for your leagues is because money is on the line. Real money. And the players playing for real money are the sharpest players. They're trying to win money, right? So it's just more accurate with how people actually react and respond to pressure and to playing for stakes. So practice in multiple ways. Free mock drafts, simulators, best ball tournaments, practice, 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 understand value and average draft position. On top of that, understand your pick. So with that draft simulator idea and the mock draft idea, understand in your draft, in your league, where you pick. And if you don't know until draft day, that's fine. But understand how different picks work this season. Understand which strategies work at certain positions best. Like, for example, I pick from number 1. I think Hero RB is the best strategy to utilize at pick number 1. Why? Because I can pick Christian McCaffrey, then I can fill the rest of my team and load it up. And then I bet on myself to find an RB2 later in the draft. That's the whole idea with it. Maybe 0 RB might be a little bit more effective from pick 6 because I can take Jamar Chase and then start wide receiver, fill up elite quarterback, elite tight end, and then get running backs later and try to work the waiver wire in the trade market for running backs later in my season, but have a loaded receiving core, a great quarterback, and a great tight end. So I have everything else solved. But understand who you probably will pick in the first round, or at least a couple different options, and then filter the rest of your draft and go from there, and understand the strategy that you think might be most effective in this scenario. So know your pick. Also understanding your pick is understanding the board If you're at pick 12 or pick 1, you're at the end of the board, which means you don't pick forever. So you need to maybe reach. You maybe can't worry about value, especially if you're in person, because everybody has a different set of rankings. Everybody has a different opinion. So I draft a lot in person. So I bring my own rankings to the table, and I kind of go off of my knowledge, but also off of average draft position from fantasy pros and things like that. So I kind of understand where players should go, but where I think I value that player. So understanding the board, and if I'm at pick 1, like I am picking this year in one of my leagues, I can't really worry about this player getting value on this player. If someone falls to me at a drastic value, that's fantastic. But if I want a guy, if I want Christian Watson in round 7, if I have to reach for him in round 6, then so be it. I'm going to take Christian Watson. Understood? Now, if you're at round 5 and it's pick 5 and you're picking 5, 6, 7 around the middle, you might actually have a lot of value fall to you naturally, because in the middle of the draft, that's where the value typically falls, and you kind of just pick up the best players from there. It's actually easier to draft from the middle because it's easier to kind of understand the board and where it's going and where a player might be able to slide back to you, because it's really impossible to know at pick 1 who's going to be there the next time I pick. Because I pick 1 and then 2 in a row, and then I have to wait forever. I don't know who's going to come back to me, but at pick 6, pick 7, I might understand that there's a better chance of this player actually coming back to me next round because it's pretty even across my picks and my selections. So understand the board, understand the different selections, the different picks, the values that might fall, the values that might not fall, and how you should play that in your draft. The final point within that, there's so many things of understanding your pick, is if you're at pick 11 or if you're at pick 2, you want to understand, okay, pick 10 and pick 12, and you want to understand pick 3 and pick 1, and you want to study their rosters. And if you're in a live draft, you want to understand who's on their teams, because I don't want to be picking a position that they already have before I have to. So if I'm pick number 2 and I see that pick number 1 has a quarterback already, they have Jalen Hurts, why would I pick Lamar before they pick? Makes no sense. I'm going to wait. I'm going to pick a receiver, and then I'm going to wait their 2 picks and then pick Lamar on the way back, because they're not going to pick Lamar unless they're an idiot, right? So understand that flow of the draft. Understand what they need, their positions of need. Also understand your league mates. Understand who loves to draft 0 RB. Understand who loves to draft a bunch of running backs. There's always that guy in every league, right? Understand who their favorite team is. Understand which players typically go higher than they should in drafts. Sometimes it's quarterbacks in certain leagues. So understand, maybe I have to reach a little bit for a quarterback just because that's how this league is, but it's not really a reach in this league because everyone's doing it. So the value is about the same. So I might have to just get my quarterback and just not absolutely be screwed at that position. And then I'll just make up for the value a little bit later because I'm smarter than you. I can outdraft you, right? So to me, understanding your league mates, understanding the board, understanding your pick, understanding the draft, period. Okay? Then we discuss ADP. Don't fall for ADP. That's the third tip. Some ADPs, average draft positions, are more valuable than others. Let's just compare 2. So ESPN, the average draft position for ESPN is filtered through their mock draft system, which is largely full of players that pick for like 3 rounds and then they leave because all their mock drafts are free. Versus DraftKings or Underdog Fantasy in Best Ball, where I could actually just have a straight up advantage taking Underdog's rankings and Underdog's ADP straight from their website in their app, taking it to my ESPN draft and just picking based on their ADPs. Because let's be fair, with all the people drafting on Underdog, playing for money, right? This is how the order should go based on all these results, all these players playing for real money, big time money, the sharpest of the sharpest. Right? So understanding that and understanding sometimes I'm not the smartest in the room, taking those player rankings and comparing them to ESPN's ADP, I can see, okay, this guy's 2 rounds higher on underdog, this guy's 2 rounds lower. Okay, there's a reason for that. Why is that? Right? So understanding the value in certain websites. If I'm drafting on Yahoo, who's going too high, who's going too low, studying that beforehand. If it's on NFL.com, etc., Sleeper, wherever you're drafting, understand, okay, who goes too high, who goes too low, where are the values, where are the players ranked, are running backs pushed up, are wide receivers pushed low, are tight ends too high. Like, there's certain websites and certain ADPs that will be all funky and all weird according to you, right? So based on your value of the player, based on your rankings of the players, based on the expert rankings you take that you trust, that you believe in, or based on smart, savvy ADPs like Underdog Fantasy, you can use those things where they're tools for you to understand who's a value, who can I get where, in which round, at what pick. So don't fall for ADP, and some ADPs are much more valuable than others. Another important point about ADP is when drafting in person. So I draft in person a lot, and if any of you guys draft in person, it's important to understand ADP because nobody really knows where a player should be going. It's just based on usually I'll use Fantasy Pros, for example. I think that's pretty standard because they take, the basic, most common websites, they put them as a collective, and a lot of the people use their tools to draft in the live setting, in the real setting. So I'll look at that website and I'll say, okay, if 9 players in my league are drafting off Fantasy Pros, I know who's suggested for them to pick at this pick. So I can compare that to my rankings and where players should go, right? But I can also say, I like this player a lot more than Fantasy Pros, so I can kind of cheat that way. Does that make sense? So also using ADP to your advantage, especially in those settings, is very, very important. The next tip is filter the rest of your draft out of the decisions you make early in the draft. So this one's simple. It's basically take the best players available in the first 3 rounds. First 4 rounds. Take the best players available, regardless of position. So in round 1, if, let's say I really want a running back, but I pick at number 4, and for some reason, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, and Bijan all went. I'm not going to be picking Jonathan Taylor 4th overall. I'm going to be picking CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill, right? So now that I've started receiver, round 2 comes. Well, understanding the board, okay, a player falls to me for some reason. Marvin Harrison Jr. fell all the way to me at this pick. I got to take him. Okay, so now we got 2 receivers on our team. And then in round 3, we get an awesome value. Let's say we think Sam Laporta is the best tight end in fantasy, so we pick him there. So we're just basing our draft off of the best player early, and then we're using the strategies that I'll discuss in a second to help us draft and help us have a structure to have a successful draft. So draft structure is crucial, which is where the strategies come in. Okay, but filtering your decisions based on what you do early in the draft is extremely crucial. If I pick 3 receivers, 3 in a row, then I pick a quarterback and I pick a tight end, understanding that I got to spam running backs now. I need to balance my roster. It doesn't make sense for me to put all this capital at the top of the draft in wide receiver or in running back or vice versa, right? And then to do the same at the end of the draft. That's a waste. You've got to try to equal the capital. So if I go double hero RB early, double running back first and second round, I'm not going to be picking 6 running backs in the last 7 rounds. I'm going to be picking 6 receivers in the last 7 rounds. Does that make sense? So balancing the capital and filtering the rest of your draft out of the early decisions made. And the final tip to dominate your league and dominate your draft is avoid older regression players that are showing clear signs of regression. Listen to fantasy podcasts, listen to fantasy experts, as many videos as you can get your hands on, you can listen to in your time, and understand the players that maybe are not playing at their peak anymore and the players that are past their prime, and generally the players that are switching teams and they're older. That's a good rule. That's just a good rule of thumb. And on the other side of that coin, draft players that are young, draft rookies, take chances on rookies later in your draft, take chances on second-year players at wide receiver, take chances on, young running backs in ambiguous backfields where you don't really know who the starter is, right? So take chances on talent at receiver, take chances on opportunity at running back later. There's a lot of different things. Take chances on athletes at tight end. There's kind of archetypes at each position. Quarterback, take chances on rushing quarterbacks. There's archetypes at each position that typically work for breakout candidates in fantasy. You might have your own takes about who's going to break out and who's not going to break out. Use that to your advantage. If you watch the NFL and you understand that Alvin Kamara is slowing down each and every year, use that to your advantage. Don't still draft him for no reason just because his name's Alvin Kamara, right? So use those things to your advantage, but generally older regression candidates, stay away. Younger, rookies, even if it's, let's say, a veteran that I kind of know he's the wide receiver 3 on his team, but I know his ceiling versus a wide receiver 4, but he's a rookie and I don't really know what he is, but he could be really good. I'd rather take the wide receiver 4 who's a rookie just because he has maybe that appeal and that upside that could break my league, right? Once upon a time, we were picking Justin Jefferson in like the 14th round, I recall one year. So it does happen, guys. Now we're going to transition to strategy, position by position strategy, and the 3 main strategies you have to understand to draft successfully in 2024. So first, 0 RB, which stands for 0 running backs. It doesn't mean literally take 0 running backs. It just means early in your draft, avoid running backs. Why? The reason behind that is because of the volatility of the position and the likeliness of injury at this position compared to wide receiver, the likeliness of bust rate compared to wide receiver. That is why 0 RB exists, because running backs are far more tied to opportunity, far more tied to contact. There's a lot of things about the running back position that make it unreliable. For example, if I'm Justin Jefferson, there is no way I am going to lose my job to a player in the NFL. I'm Justin Jefferson. I'm one of the best receivers in the NFL. So even if I bust, it might be minor. I'm still going to get targets. I'm still going to get yards. Maybe I get hurt, right? That's probably the biggest rate of busting. But when it comes to running backs, how many different running backs have we seen that was projected to start, but then just lost his job or got hurt? I mean, it happens all the time. So with 0 RB, you're just trying to take those receivers that you know are talented, that aren't losing their jobs, and they're going to give you fantasy points, especially in PPR leagues. This is definitely more viable. But at the same time, you're also trying to get an elite quarterback, an elite tight end. And I believe this is probably most viable in the middle of drafts in 2024. So let's say picks 4 through pick 9 or 10. That range, it's very viable to do a 0 RB team, depending on what falls to you in the first 2 to 3 rounds. Don't feel to force it, but there are going to be running backs that you will like in the 2nd or 3rd round. Let's say Kyron Williams in the 2nd. You might really like Isaiah Pacheco in the 3rd, or James Cook in the 4th, or Kenneth Walker in the 5th, or whatever. But just, don't force it. Let the strategy come to you. But overall, just understand how the strategy works so you can pivot when you need to, because you want to take the value at the top and then filter the rest through the back, right? Then you've got Hero RB, which is really about anchoring your team. It's also called Anchor RB, anchoring your team through one elite running back. One running back that gives you a lot of production to the point where you don't really have to rely on a second running back to put up a ton of points because you have Christian McCaffrey on your team, who's basically 2 running backs, right? So if I know I have Christian McCaffrey, I can kind of wait and fill up the rest of my team and just take shots and dart throws and dart throws and dart throws at the end of my draft to get this right at running back 2. And then with the running back position, you're also playing on that volatility. You're playing on it as the RB2 is the most replaceable position in football, in fantasy football. And understanding that RB1 is not replaceable, because if you hit on an RB1, they're magical. They're league winning. If you had McCaffrey last year, you might have won your league, or you at least had a very strong chance, right? But there were also Kyron Williams out there. So let's just say you had McCaffrey, and then on the waiver wire, you went Hero RB in your draft, and you picked up Kyron Williams. All of a sudden, you had the best running back combination in fantasy football, period. And you didn't even spend basically any of your high draft capital on an RB2. So that's how Hero RB kind of works, right? You're kind of replacing the most replaceable position, that is RB2, because you can find an RB2, a guy that catches passes, a guy that goes down, his backup steps up, he's on the waiver wire, you pick him up. There's a lot of different things that can happen there. With 0 RB, you're kind of completely avoiding the bust rate. You're completely avoiding the risk. And you're also kind of, though, leaving out the upside of possessing a McCaffrey, of possessing, let's say Bijan Robinson breaks out to an, amazing level. You'll miss out on Bijan Robinson. What if Breece Hall does the same? You'll miss out on Breece Hall because I took Tyreek Hill. And let's say Tyreek was very good, but not quite as good as, last year. And Breece Hall had 2,000 total yards, and he was an absolute maniac in fantasy. Those players, those truly elite running backs, because of the way the position is played in the NFL, they catch passes, they run the ball, they score touchdowns, they do it all, right? Receivers catch, they score touchdowns, but they don't run the ball as well. So the running back position, when they peak, they are the most valuable when they peak. That's why McCaffrey is so valuable. That's why he's worth the first pick. Even if he gets hurt, you're trying to win your league. You're trying to win your league. And if McCaffrey is there and he puts up a McCaffrey season, you have a very strong chance of winning your league just because you have him on your team. So understanding, okay, hero RB, I'm still going to go with that guy, that running back that has elite league-winning upside. And those guys catch the football. They score touchdowns. They're workhorse running backs. What you want to avoid is a hero RB that doesn't have receiving upside, doesn't have receiving chops, doesn't have a well-rounded game, isn't in a good offense. You want to find a guy that has the whole package if you want him as your hero RB. Some kind of lesser candidates, in my opinion, there, James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco. These guys are in great offenses with great quarterbacks that have pass-catching ability and could maybe explode this year that aren't drafted in the first 2 rounds. So just examples there. Hero RB doesn't just have to be Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson or Christian McCaffrey, okay? Then you've got double hero RB, which is basically, I'm going to draft the best workhorse running backs with my first 2 picks. And then I'm just going to avoid running back until like the end of my draft. I'm going to draft everything else, which is also a very viable strategy. I think especially in best ball, but in managed leagues, it's also viable as long as they stay healthy. And I would also say double hero RB is important as well if you can find handcuffs to those players. So let's say you picked McCaffrey, understanding that Jordan Mason could be valuable, and then also Kyron Williams, understanding that maybe Blake Corum might be valuable. So having their handcuffs, I think, is also pretty valuable in this type of format or strategy. But I like this strategy because you just you pick the best running backs. You know they're going to get volume. You don't have to worry about that position as long as they're healthy. And then you can just fill out the rest of your team and do it how you see fit. And I think it allows a lot of versatility in terms of I can wait on quarterback, I can wait on tight end, or I could take a tight end early and maybe wait on quarterback, and then I'll just pick a bunch of breakout receivers, a bunch of receivers. And it kind of puts you in a position as a drafter to kind of a savvy position of targeting receivers in a unique way where you're kind of trying to target those breakout receivers more so than the elite names that are already there. And you're basically kind of putting the pressure on yourself to find the next great receivers. That's where double hero RB becomes very interesting to me. Now, when just generally talking about each position, with the quarterback position, I would say that it's always about value to me, but I generally like to wait on quarterback. Generally, I would say that if a quarterback drops by like a round or like way too many picks, let's say Josh Allen is going in the 3rd and he drops the 4th, I'll take Josh Allen. No problem, right? And it is valuable to have an elite quarterback, but at the same time, the quarterback position, there's so many guys that are viable from, week 1 to week 18. Every single week, there's quarterbacks that you could pick up that are at least like manageably decent. Now, it depends on your league size, but I'm just saying on average, a 12-team league, there's going to be guys you can pick up off the waiver wire and start each and every week. There's definitely going to be those guys. There's also going to be guys that surprise, that are sleepers. There's going to be guys that are breakouts. So if you can find the right one, definitely assess the player, assess the offense, assess the situation, and go from there. I would say that I generally wait because I feel like I can fill out the rest of the positions. I like more so to go with an earlier tight end, which corresponds with my tight end strategy of try to get an elite tight end. That means one of the top 7 tight ends in fantasy. If you don't get one of those guys, I would probably try to target Jake Ferguson, maybe David Njoku, or wait for Pat Freiermuth. But the top 7 guys have the chance to all finish first, in my opinion. They're all very, very good players. And you don't really have to worry about tight end. Tight end can be very frustrating. There's been many years in fantasy where I've become extremely frustrated trying to fill that position on a weekly basis, trying to trade for that position. It becomes very valuable to have a very good tight end that you don't have to worry about. And it's almost an advantage in a lot of ways, especially if you really hit on a guy. So I'd rather have that tight end position than the quarterback position because I feel like there's so many more viable options at quarterback. And they generally score more points. And it's generally more even of a position in terms of points scored. Tight end, there can be a drastic change between the second ranked and the 12th ranked. So that's kind of my opinion there. Running back strategy, I think you want at least one in the first 3 rounds this year. That's my opinion. I'm probably not going to be doing 0 RB very often because I do like the running backs in the first 3 or 4 or 5 rounds. I do like quite a few, to the point where I'll be willing to pick multiple, in the first 3 rounds. I would say you want 1 at least, maybe 2 in the first 3 rounds. Maybe. I think 1 is a good rule, though. If you go with 1, then it kind of leaves you open to do other things, to pick multiple receivers, to pick, a tight end and a receiver, whatever you want to do there. I think 1 running back's a good rule to come out with in the first 3 rounds. And wide receiver, just generally, I think you got to target younger players, year 2 receivers, rookie receivers. I think you need to target guys that are in ambiguous situations with talent. I think you also need to target talent over situation. So with the wide receiver position, because 3 players typically play on an NFL field in an offense and 11 personnel, talent wins at wide receiver. Opportunity wins at running back in fantasy, but talent wins at wide receiver. Like I said with Justin Jefferson, he's never coming off the field. He's Justin Jefferson. He's not getting replaced. So talent wins. So try to study and try to find the talent. Defense and kicker, it does not matter. Stream it each and every week. Don't worry about it in your draft. Don't stress about it. I would even recommend that if you're far enough away from the kickoff of the NFL season, use those two slots and 2 selections if you can, if it's allowed in your league, on breakout players or backup running backs, handcuffs, whatever it may be, guys with upside later in your draft, and just don't draft a kicker or a defense. Unless you're drafting like I am in a couple of my leagues on September 4th or September 5th, right before the kickoff of the NFL season. So those are my tips, my tricks, my strategies for 2024 in fantasy football. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Peace, guys.